Hey guys, how are you? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror film from the United States, English language, released in the year 2016, directed by Billy O'Brien, and this film is called I Am Not a Serial Killer. So I'm Not a Serial Killer takes place with a young man who lives in this very remote town in the middle of winter. So this man has psychopathic tendencies and he's trying to resist those temptations of killing people by being as positive as he can. So he's getting help from his therapist. His mother works at this funeral home, so this boy is constantly exposed to dead bodies, he's exposed to death, and death really captures him and makes him very interested. So there's a serial killer on the loose that is killing a lot of people, and their bodies have been turning up mutilated. So a lot of people think it's a wild animal, but other people think it's a complete lunatic. So this young man, he is obsessed with this. He wants to get to the bottom of what makes this serial killer tick, and that he realizes that there are a lot of common sort of thought processes that he has with this serial killer. So a lot of people are worried about this young man, that he's going to go over to the dark side, but then he has to resist that urge, because not only does he want to uncover the serial killer's identity, but he also wants to protect his family. So as the situation starts to spiral downhill, more and more bodies show up. This young man is about to realize that the situation is going to be far more terrifying and unbelievable than he first thought. So not only does he have to resist the temptation of going onto the dark side himself, but he also has to try and stop this serial killer to save the town. So whether or not he can, something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now, my thoughts on I Am Not a Serial Killer. I thought this movie was very interesting in what it was trying to portray. Now, I don't think it really hit a home run, but I will say that it's a very psychological sort of serial killer film. So if you like serial killer movies, this one will provide something unique. And what I liked about it the most was the fact that it was showing a psychology of what everyday people go through, in that you're putting on a facade. Whether it's you're in love with someone, whether you're fighting back psychopathic tendencies, or whether or not you've got mental illness and you don't want other people knowing, it shows you how devastating that can be in putting on an act. Is that, for example, you're depressed and you don't want other people to realize you're depressed, so you act as though you're very happy. But that can be very tiring and it can really wear you down. And I thought the main character of this film was a prime indication of that. He had that psychopathic tendencies, but he had to put on this facade to act appropriately to what society deems. And so that was very exhausting for this character, and you feel like you go on a very emotional journey with this guy. And so you can really connect to him. Was that although he does have these very terrifying urges, you feel as though this is a guy who is trying his best to be someone that he's not. And so a lot of people do this, and a lot of people find it too hard to actually do it. So I just thought the movie does hit you on a very psychological level and a very realistic level that you can really relate to. And so you've got other characters. There's another character played by Christopher Lloyd that I thought was equally as interesting, and his character has that emotional baggage as well. He is actually being someone that he doesn't feel like on the inside. So the whole movie is about being someone that you're not and putting on that act, and how devastating that act can be, and that eventually things are going to come out in the open and it's going to be beyond your control. So it is a societal problem, in that society says you have to act this way, and if you don't feel that way, then all of a sudden you have to deal with the consequences. You have to deal with everything by yourself, because you'll feel like you'll be put on the outer. So I'm Not a Serial Killer does strike you as a typical serial killer film. It does have the elements of that, but it does hit you on a very psychological level. And I thought that psychological level makes it worth watching, is because it does separate itself from the usual type of serial killer film. So the cinematography was excellent. It was very drainy. The grainy sort of picture gave you that sense of isolation. It gave you the sense of desperation that this town had, and it gave you the sense of desperation that this character had. All the characters had that sense of loneliness, the isolation, and the fact that they had to, is basically every man for themselves, and that the support was there, but they didn't want that support. And so when you've got that lonely sense of isolation where it's you versus the rest of the world, I thought the cinematography really captured the emotion that these characters were going through. There are some scenes of violence that I thought were very well done. It doesn't rely on its gratuitous violence. It's not a graphic film, but the aftermath of it was quite gory. But I just thought it was relying on the elements that make a film good, in that it was giving you the sense of these characters are more than just one-dimensional cardboard cutouts. They are people that I can relate to, and therefore it makes it even scarier. So there are some very scary moments, there are some very bizarre moments, and I thought the end of the film, while it did get a little bit silly, I just thought to myself, okay, although the movie did get very silly, it was trying something different, and you have to applaud that in today's cinematic world. So the moments, the horror set pieces are fairly well done, but I did have a massive problem with this movie, is that about a quarter of the way into the film, you get a twist. Not so much a twist, but a revelation. And that revelation is very, very, very silly. And it kind of eliminates all the seriousness that the film has. And so as the movie goes on, after you see this revelation, you think to yourself, okay, all of a sudden it's taken on a different mood. In that the first quarter of the film was very serious, very downbeat and depressing, and quite disturbing. But then when this twist sort of happens, it takes you out of the realms and it puts you in a different sort of world. And that different world contradicted everything that the first quarter had. It contradicted all of the intrigue that the movie creates. And so although you still have that very good sort of psychology to this main character, I thought that the very silly element of it was very out of place. It didn't really match the overall mood, and therefore it does take the enjoyment out a little bit. This could have been a very serious, very disturbing character study, but in the end what you get is a movie that did get a little bit silly, and it does take itself a little less seriously than it really should have, and that it actually promises a movie that you don't quite get. And so a lot of people might like that. I'm not going to spoil anything, but a lot of people might like the way that this movie goes about its business. But I thought it would have been a lot better just having that character study of a guy who's trying to hide his feelings from the rest of the world, and these other characters who appear to be very broken as well, doing the exact same thing, and how devastating that can be, and how, after a while, basically the lid is going to blow up, and things are going to boil over. So they don't go down that route. I can applaud the fact that it was trying something different, but in the end what you get is a movie that has different tones that don't quite match, but overall it's still a very intriguing film, and if you're a fan of serial killer films, I would highly recommend it. So overall, for I'm Not a Serial Killer, going to give it 3.5 stars. Go out there and see it. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.